Don't forget to subscribe, smash the like button, and drop your favorite moment of the final in the comments, because what Chelsea did tonight deserves to be celebrated forever. If someone had told me this a month ago, I wouldn't have believed it. If they'd told me last week, I'd have laughed. If they'd whispered it this morning, I'd have accused them of sleeping in a Cole Palmer jersey and dreaming a little too hard. But it happened. It was real. It was unforgettable. Chelsea are world champions. And not just champions. They absolutely destroyed PSG in a match that will go down as one of the most dominant performances in modern football history. This wasn't just a win. It was a footballing demolition. A 3-0 masterclass delivered by the boys in blue, led by a player who's now beyond rising star, his celestial, Cole Palmer. Remember the name, because after tonight, the whole planet will. 2 goals, 1 assist, and a performance that turned the MetLife Stadium in New Jersey into his personal playground. Let's get one thing straight from the start. PSG weren't just beaten. They were dismantled, broken apart, chewed up and spat out. They came into this final as the reigning kings of Europe, the same side that had steamrolled Atletico, humbled Real Madrid, embarrassed Messi's Inter Miami, and smashed 5 into Milan in the Champions League final. A machine, a juggernaut, an unstoppable force. Well, not tonight, because tonight they were reduced to a group of tourists eating sunflower seeds on the pitch while Chelsea pressed them into oblivion. From the very first whistle, Chelsea came out with fire in their veins. Enzo Maresca's tactical plan? Genius. Calculated genius. He lined up with a back 3, stacked a midfield with physicality and pace, Reece James as an interior midfielder alongside Caicedo, and left the flanks open for Sterling and Gusto to stretch the play. It was modern, brave, and utterly brilliant. PSG? They didn't know what hit them. Minute 22. The stadium shakes. Gallagher robs Joao Neves high up the pitch. Caicedo picks it up and slides it forward. And then, Cole Palmer. He takes a delicate first touch, looks up, and with that glorious left foot of his, curls it low into the far corner. Tenas dives. Useless. The net ripples. The fans explode. The world watches in disbelief. 1-0. Chelsea. Palmer. The beginning. You'd think PSG would respond. You'd think a team of that caliber, full of stars, full of money, full of supposed footballing gods, would show some fight. They didn't. They wilted. Just 8 minutes later, minute 30, another mistake at the back. PSG trying to build out like it's a Sunday training session. Ball into midfield. Mistake. Enzo pounces. Lays it into Palmer. Now we're at the edge of the box. And Palmer? His ice cold. 2 defenders on him. Doesn't matter. 1 shimmy, 1 fake, and bang. Left foot again. Near post. Roof of the net. No celebration this time. Just swagger. Arms out. Eyes to the crowd. 2-0. Chelsea. Palmer again. King Cole. The MetLife is shaking. The PSG bench looks like they're watching a funeral procession. Luis Enrique stands motionless. His side, his best team in Europe, has just been outclassed, not by superstars, but by a team that finished 4th in the Premier League and won the Conference League. And then came the third, the one that turned this match into a historical event. Minute 44. PSG's entire backline is caught napping again. Sterling breaks down the left, finds Palmer in the half space. Palmer, once again showing that he's not just a scorer, but a creator, threads an inch-perfect pass through traffic. And arriving like a lightning bolt is Joao Pedro. 1 touch. Bang. A cross goal. Goal. 3-0. Chelsea. If Palmer is a conductor, Joao Pedro is a soloist. That finish? Pure class. Composure. Technique. Killer instinct. A Brazilian gem, ready to write his name in blue for the next decade. Chelsea fans lost their minds. PSG fans, if any were still watching, likely turned off the TV. Game over before halftime. The stats? Brutal. First half. 3 goals. 11 shots to PSG's 2. 61% possession. 0 saves needed from Petrovic. Let me put it simply. PSG weren't just second best. They weren't even in the same league. The second half was more balanced, but only because Chelsea let it be. They'd done the damage. They controlled the game like seasoned veterans. The press continued. The possession was clinical. Dembele had a half chance. Asensio tried a speculative long-ranger. But really, it was all just delay. The world champions were already crowned. Dilap came on and nearly added 2 more. Estevio, not even here yet, must be watching thinking, I'm about to join that. And Gittins, recently signed from Dortmund, is licking his lips knowing that this attack is just getting started. Then came the spicy moment. Minute 85. Cucurella, who somehow always finds himself in chaos, gets grabbed by the hair by Joao Neves, clearly frustrated and out of ideas. Straight red. PSG down to 10. Symbolic. Really, by that point, they were down to 0 in spirit anyway. Luis Enrique didn't shake a single hand after full time. Walked straight into the tunnel. And that, right there, tells you everything. He knew they were humbled. An entire team eaten alive by a Chelsea side that pressed like wolves, attacked like artists, and defended like soldiers. And Cole Palmer. There aren't enough words. He has now scored 7 goals in 6 finals. That's iconic territory. The man lives for the big stage. And today, he didn't just rise to the occasion. He owned it. Dare we say Ballon d'Or contender? Not in the future. Now. So let's say it clearly. Chelsea are world champions. Not because they scraped by, not because of a lucky deflection, because they played like titans, because they crushed Europe's best, because Cole Palmer, Joao Pedro, and Enzo Maresca turned a difficult final into a training session. From Reece James dominating midfield, to Levi Colwill owning every duel, to Caicedo destroying transitions, to Malo Gusto being the fastest man alive, this team didn't miss a step. From the press to the tactics to the substitutions, Chelsea outclassed PSG in every area of the game. And this isn't just a celebration. This is a warning to the Premier League, to the Champions League, to every elite side in the world. Chelsea are back, and they are not here to participate. They are here to dominate. With Palmer and Joao Pedro at the helm, the future is bright. With Estevio and Gittins coming in, the attack is nuclear. With Maresca in charge, there's finally a plan, and it works. This is the Chelsea we've been waiting for. This is the Chelsea that doesn't fold. This is a Chelsea that destroys the kings of Europe and lifts the trophy high. Chelsea 3, 0 PSG. World champions. And just getting started. Let the world take note. London is blue. The world is blue. And King Cole sits on the throne. The final whistle hadn't just marked the end of a game. It detonated an eruption of blue across the globe. Fans in West London, in Lagos, in Jakarta, in New York, even in Tokyo, were jumping, screaming, crying. People in full Chelsea kit sprinting down the streets like madmen, hugging strangers, calling relatives, FaceTiming mates just to yell, "We've done it," into the screen. Inside the MetLife, Palmer was still standing there, arms spread wide, like a rock star who just dropped the MIC after a sold-out arena show. He wasn't smiling out of arrogance. It was calm, a killer's calm, the look of a man who had envisioned this moment 1,000 times before. The boy Pep Guardiola deemed surplus to requirements was now the face of the biggest club performance on the planet. Maresca walked onto the pitch with the grace of a man who knew exactly what he'd built. No shouting, no theatrics, just that subtle nod to his staff, the nod that says, "We said we'd do it, and we did." Behind him, the squad formed a circle, players dropping to their knees, pointing to the sky, pounding the badge on their chests. This wasn't luck. It was destiny written with grit, sweat, and brilliance. Joao Pedro, meanwhile, had just dropped to the turf, face buried in his shirt, overwhelmed. You could see it in his body, the emotion, the disbelief, the fulfillment. For a kid from Ribeirão Preto, Brazil, now scoring in the biggest final of his life, in front of 80,000 roaring fans and millions watching at home, this wasn't just football. This was poetry. And the fans. My God, the fans. The shed end spirit had crossed the Atlantic. That corner of the stadium was a living organism, drums pounding, scarves twirling, voices cracking, grown adults sobbing like children. Chants of Super Cole Palmer, echoed into the night sky. The flags waved, the banners went up, kings of London, kings of the world. They weren't just supporting. They were part of the victory. They were the 11th man. Back on the pitch, Sterling couldn't stop smiling. Caicedo was lifting Colwill off the ground like a trophy. Cucurella was being held back, again, because he was trying to get into a second post-match argument. He lives for it, let's be honest. Even Petrovic, who barely had to make a save all night, sprinted the full length of the pitch to join the pile of bodies collapsing on Palmer. And you could tell this wasn't just a win for the squad. It was for every fan who sat through the post-2021 chaos. It was for the ones who watched us fall apart under multiple managers, for those who stayed loyal during the Conference League memes, for the ones who said, back your club no matter what. Because tonight, we weren't backing a project anymore. We were celebrating a masterpiece. And at the heart of that masterpiece stood two names, carved in gold now, Palmer and Joao Pedro. Not just scorers, not just stars. Symbols. Symbols of rebirth. Symbols of what happens when talent meets trust. Symbols of what Chelsea Football Club is becoming. And there, under the floodlights, as the team gathered in front of the fans with the trophy waiting in the wings, Palmer looked around, at the faces, the flays, the chaos, the tears, and nodded. He didn't need to say a word. He'd already spoken with his feet. And what his feet said was everything. They told the story of a kid once labeled surplus, now standing like a colossus among giants. They told the story of precision, poise, and pure footballing instinct, a language more powerful than any post-match interview, more elegant than any press conference. In that frozen second, where the world held its breath beneath the New Jersey night, Palmer's silence was louder than thunder. Around him, the moment thickened. You could feel it in the air, almost heavy, like the atmosphere before a storm, only now it was emotional instead of electric. The smell of grass and sweat mixed with the smoke from flares lit by the traveling fans. One flare, blue as the night sky, drifted across the lower stands like a comet, as if it too had made the pilgrimage just to witness this moment. Behind the goal, a father lifted his young son onto his shoulders, pointing to Palmer. The boy didn't blink. He simply stared, wide-eyed, mouth slightly open, as if seeing a superhero for the first time. Because for that child, for thousands of children, this was their superhero moment. No cape, just a Chelsea badge and a left foot soaked in magic. And then the chanting grew louder again. Not from one end, but all of them. The entire stadium, even the neutrals, even the PSG fans who'd stayed behind, all recognized what they had just witnessed. A performance so polished, so pure, so utterly perfect, that even rivalry had to pause for respect. Cole Palmer, LLA. Joao Pedro, Enzo's Blues, champions of the world. And as that sound rose, thousands of voices, uniting across rows of blue, Palmer lowered his arms, placed his hands briefly on his hips, and looked over at Joao Pedro. There it was. The glance. No words. Just a smile. A small one. The kind of smile shared by two people who know they just changed the script. Not just for themselves. Not just for Chelsea. But for football. Joao Pedro jogged over to him, wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his wrist, teeth showing now as he laughed. The two embraced, palms on the back of each other's heads, short and tight. Not theatrical. Not showy. Just real. The kind of hug that says, we did this. You and me. We did this. Photographers around them were going mad. Click. Flash. Click. Dozens of camera shutters, trying to freeze the exact second when legends were made. And somewhere, deep in Stamford Bridge, the ghost of Chelsea passed. From Zola to Drogba, from Lampard to Hazard, might have smiled too. Because this wasn't just a final. It was a passing of the torch. And the world, though it didn't know it yet, had just entered the Palmer and Pedro era. And for a fleeting second, it was as if the world faded around them. The fans, the noise, the floodlights, everything softened into the background, leaving just the two of them, standing in the center of a universe they had just reshaped with their boots. Palmer's head leaned ever so slightly into Joao's shoulder, not out of exhaustion, but almost as if he needed that human contact to believe it was real. The grass beneath their stud still held the vibrations of the game, of the passes, the tackles, the goals, like a living memory etched into the turf. You could almost feel the echoes of their movement swirling in the humid air, suspended, as if time refused to move forward. Joao Pedro stepped back just an inch, gripping Palmer by both shoulders now, eyes locked, and said something, just a single phrase, unheard by the world. But Palmer grinned, wide, that rare, unguarded grin. Not the confident swagger from the goals, not the composed expression of post-match calm. This was the smile of a kid who had just lived the best moment of his life and didn't care who saw it. And behind him, 1,000 tiny things unfolded in parallel. Cucurella, hair now untamed from the scrap minutes earlier, was laughing uncontrollably as Gallagher poured water over his head like a baptism. Mellow Gusto, jersey half untucked, was shaking his head in disbelief, hand on his heart, eyes on the scoreboard that still glowed. Chelsea 3-0 PSG. Sterling, having given every ounce of breath, leaned against the post like a man who just won a war. Not with weapons, but with football. Even the substitutes, those who didn't touch a blade of grass tonight, stood on the edge of the technical area as if drawn by an invisible pull toward the pitch. Bashir Humphreys, young but wide-eyed, whispered to Alfie Gilchrist, "This is history, bro. We're in the middle of it." And Gilchrist just nodded, biting his lip. No words needed. Back near midfield, Enzo Fernandez, ever the maestro, clapped slowly, deliberately. His eyes, usually scanning for passing lanes, now scanned the crowd. He looked proud, not just of the win, but of the team around him, of the chemistry, the fire, the belief, and maybe, just maybe, of the fact that Chelsea had finally found its identity again. Because that was a truth humming beneath the celebration, this wasn't a one-off miracle. This wasn't a smash and grab. This was a culmination of something real. Something Maresca had envisioned since day one. The youth, the hunger, the cohesion. It all clicked, on the biggest stage of all. And yet, Palmer and Joao Pedro were still there, frozen in that hug. The cameras flashing less now. The sound around them still roaring, but softened by emotion. For those few seconds, it felt like everything they'd ever dreamed had stopped being hypothetical. It had become physical, tactile, real. They had just conquered the world. Together, and beneath the stadium roof, as the sky began to darken into that deep navy twilight, the Chelsea fans began to sing again. Not a chant this time, but a song. That old familiar melody. Musical note blue as a color. Football the game. Musical note. And for the first time in a long time, it felt undeniably true. The sound of the song, blue as a color, wasn't coming from a single section anymore. It swelled organically, like a wave rolling in from the deepest part of the ocean. From the shed-end fans planted behind the goal, to the families seated pitchside in row one, all the way to the upper tiers packed with neutrals who now found themselves swept into something bigger than football, everyone was singing. But the song wasn't just sound. It was vibration. You could feel it in the metal of the stadium railing, trembling softly with each beat of the collective voice. You could feel it in your chest, your fingers, the back of your neck. A current running through every part of the MetLife. Through the boots on the pitch. Through the blades of grass. Through Palmer and Joao Pedro still locked in that quiet, eternal embrace. And in that space, in the eye of the storm they themselves had created, there was no time, no rush, no camera cue, no official interrupting with medals. It was just stillness, the kind of stillness you only experience in a dream you don't want to wake up from. The kind of stillness that makes you believe, even just for a moment, that football isn't just a game. It's something closer to a religion. Joao Pedro's hand, still resting on Palmer's shoulder, gripped just a little tighter. Not forceful, not urgent, just enough to say, "Feel this, soak this in. We may live it again one day, but this will always be the first." Palmer nodded, barely. His eyes were red now, wet at the edges. Not tears, not yet, but that feeling, that overwhelming tidal wave of everything he had worked for, all crashing down in one perfect moment, was starting to push at his chest. And all around them, the moment expanded. Behind the dugout, Maresca stood with his arms crossed, staring out onto the pitch with a sort of stillness usually reserved for statues in museums. But if you looked closer, you'd see the way his fingers tap against his bicep, not in nerves, but in rhythm, in recognition. He wasn't celebrating wildly. He wasn't smiling broadly. He was just watching, absorbing. To the naked eye, Maresca was motionless. But inside, you could tell, he was glowing, not just with pride, but with the satisfaction of a man who had drawn the blueprint and watched it come alive, pixel by pixel, touch by touch, pass by pass. The tactics, the shape, the pressing lanes, the space manipulation, it had all unfolded exactly as he saw it in his mind. And maybe that's why he didn't need to shout. Because when you've orchestrated a symphony and the orchestra delivers something even more beautiful than you imagined, what words are left? To his left, Enzo Fernandez finally broke from his stillness. He turned, jogging lightly toward Gallagher and Rhys James, who were now sitting on the turf like schoolboys who just won the playground tournament. Their boots were off, their socks dirty, their faces glowing with the sweaty exhaustion only a perfect performance can give you. Gallagher, still panting, turned to Rhys. "Mate!" he breathed. That press was violent. Rhys laughed, leaning back on his hands. Palmer didn't even break a sweat. He was floating, floating. They both laughed. That kind of laugh that's somewhere between exhaustion and joy and disbelief. And around them, the cameras continued to flash, trying to freeze something unfreezable. Somewhere behind the scenes, the match footage was already being cut into montages. Palmer's curlers, Pedro's run, Sterling's diagonal pass, Colwell's slide tackles, the block shot from Gusto in the 60-second that no one noticed but that kept the clean sheet alive. All of it will be turned into TikToks, shorts, reels. But in this second, this eternal second, none of that mattered. What mattered was a human moment. And that human moment was everywhere. A steward near the tunnel wiped his eyes with the sleeve of his yellow jacket. A ball boy near the corner flag held his breath as Palmer walked past him, just 10 feet away. One kid in the front row held up a homemade sign. "Cole, you made me believe again." And further up in the stands, an older couple stood side by side. The woman clutched a scarf from the 2012 Champions League final, frayed at the ends, and whispered. Drogba would have loved this. Her husband, eyes glassy, nodded. Palmer's got his aura. Different style. Same ice. They said nothing else. They didn't need to, because this match, this moment, wasn't just about silverware. It was spiritual restoration. Chelsea had lost itself. Through chaos, through manager roulette, through bloated squads and confusion and mediocrity, the soul had been buried beneath the noise. But now it was awake, roaring, dancing. And the heartbeat of that soul was a 23-year-old from Manchester who played like he'd been carved out of Chelsea stone. Somewhere across the globe, in a pub in West London, perhaps, a fan slammed their pint down and yelled, "He's one of our own now." And every Chelsea fan watching, whether in Lagos or Seoul or Buenos Aires, nodded in agreement. Because yes, technically, he came from City. But spiritually, Cole Palmer was born in blue tonight. Back on the pitch, Palmer finally stepped away from Joao Pedro. His hand reached up, brushing the fringe from his forehead. And for a moment, he looked straight up into the floodlights. It wasn't just the lights hitting his face. It was everything. The weight of the shirt. The echo of every kid that once dreamed of scoring in a world final. The voice of every critic who said Chelsea were finished. The joy of every young baller who thought they weren't big enough for the big stage. It all came pouring down on him from those lights. And he stood in it, still, soaking it in. The camera zoomed tight. The commentators whispered now, letting the moment breathe. And then, just barely audible through the ambient stadium noise, Palmer whispered to himself, "It's ours now." 3 words. No roar, no jump, no arms out wide. Just that whisper into the night, into history. And somehow, it was enough. Joao Pedro walked back toward the midfield circle. On his way, he high-fived Enzo, shoulder-bumped Colwell, slapped Gusto playfully on the back of the head. Every touch, every gesture, it carried weight, not just celebration. This wasn't surface-level joy. This was deep, the kind of joy you earn. And yet, the scoreboard still glowed the same. Chelsea 3, 0 PSG. No goals added. No new stats. No substitution announcements. Just stillness. Stillness that throbbed with electricity. Stillness you could feel. Up in the stands, the fans had begun filming everything. Not because they needed more footage, but because they wanted to capture the feeling. That elusive, impossible thing that every football fan chases year after year, season after season. Pure joy, pure pride, pure meaning. And as the singing continued, no rhythm section now, just raw voices, there was one chant that took over. Multiple musical notes, champions of the world, la 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 la. Multiple musical notes. Over and over. A heartbeat. A declaration. An awakening. Palmer turned, looking toward the fans. He raised one hand. Just one. The sound doubled. Tripled. It became a wall of noise. A wall of belief. He didn't wave. He didn't point. He just stood, facing them, arm raised like a banner. And in that second, with sweat on his brow, grass on his socks, and history under his boots, he became immortal. Not because he was perfect, but because he was exactly what Chelsea needed. A believer, a fighter, a leader, one of us. And beside him, Joao Pedro clapped once, loudly, then again, and again, slowly, deliberately. The team began to join. Reece James first, then Gallagher, then Caicedo, Gusto, Enzo, Colwill, Cucurella, Sterling, Petrovic. It became a rhythm, a slow, thunderous clap, matching the beat of the fans, sinking every heart in that stadium to the same pulse. Blue is back. And so there they stood, not just as players, but as symbols of something far greater. Cole Palmer, motionless beneath the floodlights, absorbing the weight of history. Joao Pedro, proud, calm, and glowing in the moment he'd helped shape. Around them, a Chelsea squad reborn, a fan base awakened, a stadium still humming with the aftershock of greatness. This wasn't just a final. It wasn't just a win. It was a resurrection of belief, of pride, of identity, a night that turned doubters into believers, cynics into dreamers, and a team into champions of the world. And maybe tomorrow, the headlines will talk about tactics, or XG, or market values, but none of that will capture what this moment meant. Because this moment, frozen under those MetLife lights, belongs to the fans, to the ones who never stopped hoping, to the ones who stayed when it was ugly, to the ones who bled blue, no matter how dark it got. This is your reward, your night, your Chelsea, your champions. So if you felt what we felt, if your heart raced, if you shouted with joy, if you cried even a little, move your camera, then subscribe. Right now, smash that like button, and drop a comment below telling us where you watched this final and what it meant to you. Because this community, like this club, is built by the believers. And tonight, more than ever, we believe in blue. Blue heart. #subscribe, #like, #comment. Let's share this moment forever. Up the Chels, world champions.